Hi, folks. I am here with Benny, and I am really excited about this conversation. Mostly because in one of the previous episodes that I did, we were talking about, well, talking to my friends who found each other while they were abroad. And now I just thought that it would be appropriate for us to talk about singles, how to thrive while traveling, because most of the time when you're traveling, you may be in that bracket. And I just wanted to speak to Benny today because he had an experience. Right now he is married and he's a newlywed, but he did have the experience of being single while he was traveling for a while. So we just wanted to talk about that and how through his experience he learned a lot that helped him. So Benny, could you tell us more about yourself, please?
Well, I'm Benny. I'm 33 now. I got married at the age of 32. I'm from Germany, and over the years, I've traveled a lot. Especially being married at the age of 32, I had a lot of time of traveling as a single person, and so I guess that's why you reached out to me. During those years, I studied in several on several continents. And the last thing I did was being a software engineer in Germany. I love being abroad. I love getting to know new cultures. I love immersing myself in something new and kind of escaping the mundane every now and then. So right now I'm in Turkey, which is completely different. I've lived in America, in Japan, a couple other nations.
Wow.
Total, I've visited somewhere in the 20s as a number of nations that I've been to, somewhere around the
Wow.
20s.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, so it's been a good life. We got married. My wife, she's American, I'm German, so
Wow.
they will also have a cross-cultural um, issue at hand. And at the same time, we met actually in Turkey, so it's a very interesting thing where three cultures suddenly came together. And so yeah, hope I can contribute something to the conversation about traveling as a single person, maybe getting married as a person who lives abroad, all the dynamics and issues. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story to help us as well. It is interesting that you met in Turkey. So you're German and she's from the United States of America, and she you both met in Turkey. That's amazing. Actually, the couple that I interviewed before, so my friend, she's Chinese, and then the other guy, he was German. It's interesting. Lots of German people right now.
I guess we're everywhere.
Yeah. So how did you do your best to thrive traveling while single?
I would say in general, it really depends on the personality. The answer that I would give for me, um, like some people, they naturally thrive in unfamiliar settings, and I'm one of those people. I don't really have to do a lot, and I don't have to be very intentional or read books on traveling, on being abroad. I love it. I thrive in those situations. I would rather be in a context that I'm unfamiliar with than in Germany or America or something that's just too comfortable for me. I love stressing myself out a little bit by getting into situations and contexts where I just don't know what to do and have to figure it out. So I love that. For other people, it might not be that easy. They're not naturally inclined to push the boundaries, I would say. So, but I would say a few things that have helped me and that I've discovered are very beneficial when living abroad, when being abroad as a single, both as a single and as a single person, and just in general is, and it also depends on your needs and circumstances of travel. So are you traveling alone? Are you traveling with a group? Are you comfortable being single, or is it mostly hard for you? And what are your expectations? What do you want to get out of traveling? I think one of the important things in general is to, and that's something that I found very beneficial, is to be intentional with friends and families, like with your own family. I mean, to keep the contact, to keep the the conversation going, to be involved in what's happening in your hometown, to be involved with your friends that you already have. Because sometimes in the novelty of everything new, this can take, it can kind of fade into the background, and you can forget that you have family to care for. You have friends that you already made. In the process of making new friends, you sometimes can forget the value of those friendships. And for me, it's been very helpful to have people that I'm very intentional in investing in and staying connected to. And this doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be anything regular. With my family, I found very helpful to have a weekly call of, we have a Skype conference where everyone is there and we just hang out. We're all now living in different places, and so it's been very helpful to have this family time, just like we live in the same place at least for an hour a week, and we interact, we just have fun. There's no rules or anything, or no agenda that we're going through. It's just living together, and I found that very connecting. And I do believe you sometimes need those connecting points with friends, long-term friends, especially when traveling abroad, because it is just the depth that's a little bit different to the new relationships that you form, new friendships that you form abroad on the one hand. And then secondly, sooner or later, you'll come back home. And if you have this gap of not really relating to these people, and then you come home, the transition home will be a lot more difficult. So being intentional with friends, with your family, to call them every now and then, to just reach out, to write an email, or to have something more regular, like a weekly family Skype call. That's been very helpful for me, especially when you start, like, you just travel somewhere else, everything is new. Having something of permanence in your life is very helpful. Then another thing, especially as a single person, and especially if you travel on your own, is to be intentional even with the friendships and contacts that you form abroad. Like, you go somewhere, don't just do the sightseeing on your own. Connect with people, try to get involved, try to find people that you already might know, or that friends of you know. Find them, reach out to them, hang out with them, because that actually helps you get more involved with the culture, helps you have someone there in your life that can help you should something go wrong. And it's something where I found it takes a lot of effort and a lot of self-initiative. Like, you don't just go to a different place. In most situations, you just don't go somewhere else and then magically you form 10, 20 new bonds. You actually need to put some effort in it. And depending on your personality, whether you're introvert, whether you're extrovert, it can be more challenging or easier, come very natural to you. For me, it's not that natural. And so as an introvert, I found it very helpful to force myself sometimes to just interact with people, to form new friendships, to get to know people. And even if it's just a person like the waiter at the coffee shop that you went to 3 times, start talking to them a little bit more than just placing your order. That will be very helpful. It certainly has been very helpful for me. And then other points are more related to the single aspect, being single while traveling. And again, it depends on whether you actually enjoy and you don't want it to change. And then on the other hand, when you're traveling, you're single, and you actually do want your relationship status to change. So on the one hand, imagine you go somewhere and you're just content. You don't want to be in a relationship for whatever reason, whatever it is. I've been there. And one of the things is to really settle that in your heart. As you go, as you move somewhere, as you travel somewhere, to not get into a relationship. Like, say to yourself, I'm fine, and whatever comes, whatever happens, I will not get into a relationship during that time, because you'll probably run into nice looking people. You'll probably run into interesting personalities. And depending on how long you stay in a certain place, something can actually develop. And Well, the problem is if you're not already settled in your heart that you actually do want to date, then most likely you will probably find your way into a relationship that you don't fully want, and then sooner or later the heart will get broken. So that's not good. It's not ideal. So I would say if you don't want to date, then settle in your heart that during the duration of the trip you will not date. You will not get involved with anyone. You will not lead anyone on. You will be very clear about your boundaries. Should you see something developing, and the main reason for that is that way you won't get sidetracked. You won't get involved with something. Whatever your reasons were for saying I don't want to date anyone, you keep them upheld by not dating anyone.
You stick to them.
Yes, exactly. Stick to your decisions. And the other thing is, it will give you so much freedom, because then you don't have to analyze certain people. Like, is there potential there? Is there no potential there? You keep yourself from daydreaming, and so on and so on and so on. Basically, you keep yourself on the focus that you set yourself without having to get sidetracked by a potential relationship that, if you said yes to it, might, because you didn't want it in the first place, might actually not end up working out. So it's been very helpful for me to just say, I'm not going to get into a relationship, and then to really stick to this decision for the duration of the travel time.
Yeah, you hit so many points. I want to go to what you said about, your relationships. I really liked what you said about having something permanent, or having something of permanence. So your relationships back home, your family, your friends, trying to always keep in touch, to lessen that gap, so that when you go back home, which might happen eventually, it won't be so hard for you to reconnect, because, one part of reverse cultural shock, I think, is when you have to reconnect with people. Reverse cultural shock is like the reverse of cultural shock. So when you go back home, for some reason, things at home seem new. So I think having those relationships still maintained as much as possible helps. So I really like that a lot. And then just sticking to your goals. If you decide that you will not date for a while, well, stick to it. Just as you said, because then you won't have to analyze people, or, unnecessarily lead someone on. Yeah, I really like those points, and I think they are really helpful.
Absolutely. Especially reverse culture shock for me personally has been the worst. I've never had culture shock abroad. I always only had it when I went back, because so having, and one of the reasons for reverse culture shock is, of course, things change back home, but at the same time you change, and if you don't involve other people in the changes and the processes you're in, then it will be quite difficult in the beginning to relate to them. So one of the ways to do that is to call them and just keep them updated on what's happening in your life, and that way when you go back, you just seamlessly continue your relationship, and they can relate to what you've experienced. So that helps a lot.
Yeah, wow. I'm taking so many good notes right here. I never really thought of it in that way, like maintaining your relationship so that you can lessen the effects of reverse cultural shock. So amazing. What did you learn during your single off seasoness? I can't.
All right.
Singleness while you were traveling that you think is really helpful to you right now.
A couple points come to my mind. One of them is smart use of money. So if you travel and you're on your own, you have to bring all the money that you have. And if you run out of money, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So learning to use it well is definitely a skill you will or should develop during traveling,
Mm-hmm.
especially as a single person, especially when you're on your own, because again, you won't have any other support than the money and the resources that you have.
Yeah.
And again, being on your own, like in a marriage relationship, it's a little bit different because you have a bigger circle of supporters. Like you have two families that can step in if something goes wrong, but on your
Mm-hmm.
own, it's a little bit different. So especially there, it's important to get that skill down. Another thing that I learned is, or still, I'm still in the process of learning it and getting this skill down, is emotional resilience. Traveling as a single person can be sometimes emotionally tiring, can be challenging,
Yeah.
because especially if you do want it to change, if you do want to get into a relationship, something that it's not always that easy, and you can actually traveling actually can hinder spouse finding or dating life in a very significant way, just because there's no routine. You're only in one place for a certain amount of time. There's no permanence, and that makes it difficult, neither in your life, mostly in the other person's life. Just the same if they're traveling as well, or if they're a foreigner, it's a little bit different. But emotional resilience, learning to take a step back from your own emotions, to look at them as an outsider, and then determine what to do with them. Your emotions don't determine what you have to do and how you have to deal with them. That helps a lot. Like, you can be in pain over being single. You can suffer culture stress. You can feel homesickness. And so often we think of ourselves as being slaves to those emotions. If I'm homesick, well, I should go back home, right? But if you take a step out from those emotions, out of yourself, if you want to put it that way, you look at your life, you look at yourself like an outsider, and then you realize that those emotions, they are there, they're real, but they don't determine what you have to do. Like, your emotions don't make the decisions, you make the decisions, and you have the privilege to make those decisions, how you handle and what you do. So you can feel homesick, but at the same time you actually do want to be abroad. Then just decide that in your heart. Your homesickness has nothing to do with whether or not you can stay in that place. Your desire and the pain that you feel over being single, for instance, does not mean that you have to change something about your life circumstances at the moment to like that you have to go back to your home country or to your hometown and get involved with all the friends of the other gender or something like that. It's not, there's not a need. You can feel the pain without having necessarily to respond to it. You can acknowledge it and then say, yes, I feel that, but I'm going to do this or that instead. And that's something very helpful as a single, but in general, in life, very, very helpful. It's been very helpful in learning how to deal with stress, learning how to deal with issues in my life, learning how to deal with my own emotions. And I believe this, finding this distance to your own emotions, not as in I have to deny them, but I acknowledge them, but ultimately understand that they don't decide what I'm going to do with my life. That's been a very helpful skill, and I still benefit from that. Having learned that, especially in the context of living in a different context, where sometimes you just want something comfortable, you just want to go back, you want everything to be normal, predictable, which you usually don't have in a culture that's not your own, that you don't really know.
Yeah.
But then very easy to just tear down all the tents and move back home. Or you realize, yeah, that's how I'm feeling now. It doesn't mean I will feel like that forever. And over time, it will settle as I keep on doing whatever I want to do.
Yeah, wow, so inspiring. So you don't allow your emotions to be the ones that lead you, especially when they're
Exactly.
negative.
Of course, they play a role in my decision-making process, but
Yeah,
at the same time, they are not
yeah,
the highest role.
yeah,
I
because
take
they,
their
Mhm.
intel and then make an informed, holistic
Yeah,
decision. But emotions alone are not a good, reliable source to make wise decisions in most cases.
yeah, that's so true. I mean, yes, listen to them because they are telling you something that's going on, but you don't let them be the only guide because they can be misleading at times.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow, so good. How can you be intentional about your time and your talents?
So I believe in general, while traveling, so traveling, there's a balance. Because travel, in most cases, you will do for enjoyment and for experience and not necessarily for productivity. as most of us know, during your travel times, you'll probably not be the most productive in your life just because there's so many things that are happening, so many details of life that you need to focus on. So there's a balance that we need to find between leisure, enjoyment, and experience on the one hand, and then productivity on the other hand. I believe when it comes to being intentional to your time with your time and your talents, I believe a lot of the things that travel shapes is not necessarily your skills, and it's not going to be very productive in most cases, but it will shape your character. And I still believe that's a lot of significant progress and that you make. And that to me is definitely productivity in one sense, but not in the sense of getting something accomplished, something tangible accomplished. So just something to keep in mind as you travel. You'll probably not be the most productive, and to find your yes and you're okay with that, like to be okay, to find your peace with the fact of a certain decline of your productivity is certainly helpful. At the same time, I do believe it's very important to schedule downtime, to be creative, to schedule downtime, to study something, to read a book or whatever, and whatever you want to do, whatever talent or skill you want to invest in. Get some coffee shop time, some coffee shop days, schedule them. Be intentional about time to not waste and time to waste. Wow. Meaning you don't have to rush through everything. Don't allow yourself during your travels to just rush through all the experiences, but schedule time to reflect, to process, to write, to think. And that can look like one day where you just spend half of the day at a coffee shop, writing, doing whatever you want. With that together, another skill or another tip that I would give is to stay in one place for a little bit. And also it comes down to the frequency of your travels. But it might be a day where you just do nothing, no sightseeing. It might be longer, depending on what your travels look like. But to stay for a little bit, it gives you time to focus on something that you actually want to do without being distracted by all these things around you. So, but it also often requires for you to get a little bit comfortable with the place that you stay in order to, for productivity to have a place to shine. Yeah. Then another thing is online courses. Just the transitional life of traveling doesn't always make it easy to do something permanent, like studying a whole semester or a whole course even.
Yeah.
So online courses, you can do them whenever, you can do them wherever, and it's definitely something that you can use, you can benefit from by just enrolling to an online course. So, the internet is filled with stuff like that, so it's not hard to find anything focusing on your talent or your skill. And the good thing about traveling while being single is you have the time, you have the flexibility to just take a day off, to not interact with other people, to become productive. You don't really have this benefit that much when you're in a relationship and there's another human being that is more or less always next to you, part of your life, and you have to care about them, care for them, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly, because you have to consider their needs as well, and they'll need you around. So your time is not for yourself only anymore.
Exactly.
I mean, it's still good, but it's something to consider.
Yeah. So if you want to be productive, it's best to stay single while traveling, because traveling alone already takes a lot of time and productivity out of your life.
Right. Yeah, something to consider. So how can a single person protect themselves while traveling?
Okay, well, I'm a guy, so it looks a little bit different for a guy than for a woman, obviously. There are a lot of obvious things that you can do to avoid getting in trouble, and that can be sexual stuff, that can be theft, that can be just other issues where you get robbed or get violent circumstances. So there are a lot of obvious things like don't walk alone at night, avoid shady areas wherever you go. Ask someone whether the region you're in or you want to go to is good, is safe or not.
Yeah.
Don't get drunk. Don't get involved in pub crawls. They're very fancy, and a lot of young people love going to a new city. And then I'm not sure whether you guys know pub crawls, but it's basically you go to a city and they have these pub crawls. You have a one-time fee for an entire night, and you have usually the first hour where you can drink as much as you want, and then you go with a group of people that you don't know from one bar to the next. I was traveling a couple years ago with a bigger group of friends to Prague in Czech Republic for Christmas and New Year's, and some of them decided to go join a pub crawl, and so most of them were Americans, so they don't know the native language. They would just hang out with people. I didn't go, of course. I don't want to get drunk. I've never been drunk in my life, and I don't want that to change, especially not while being abroad. And so I stayed at the hotel, did some other things, and they just would not come back. So it was like 3 a.m., still no sign of them coming back. And then it was a group of girls and one guy. They went out, and in small groups of two, sometimes just a single person, they came back step by step, like over the next 2 hours up until around 5 a.m. Like single girls on their own in their non-native, in a country abroad, drunk, that they cannot even find their way back home, trying to go through on a weekend, go through the downtown area of the big city on their own. That was not smart.
Yeah.
So
sounds dangerous.
Definitely. And so pub crawls, not a good idea. It is something a lot of tourists like. Don't do it. Then of course, keep your possessions close. I prefer, when it comes to wallets, passport, to have them not even just like when I sleep, for instance, to take them in my bed with me, and not just have them somewhere out and about, especially when you're staying at a hostel. That's very helpful. Wow. Have pepper spray if it's legal. Keep bags closed while being outside, walking around. If you have a purse, if you have a backpack, make sure it's locked. Make sure it's not easy to get to open up. A couple of my friends from Brazil, they went to Germany recently over Christmas as well. And on the subway, crowded subway, they got their passports stolen. And so they missed their flights because they couldn't board it, had to go to the embassy. It was a drama. Don't do it. Keep your possessions close to you and in a safe area. But one thing that helps as a male and as a female, but as a male specifically, when you go outside, and sometimes you just cannot avoid going into shady areas or being on your own in the middle of the night, is posture. Meaning slow and big movements, not be fidgety, to not look scared or fidgety or like to not crouch over or something like that. You want to look very confident and a little bit annoyed, have a little bit of an annoyed facial expression as you walk through areas, because it makes you look intimidating, and people will not mess with you. Even if you have people messing with you, someone shouting at you from behind you in the middle of the night or something like that, don't turn around quickly. Turn around slowly. Look at him, acknowledge, and then look a little bit annoyed and keep going. Never had any issues. I used to live in Japan, and I did geocaching. Geocaching, for those who don't know, it's a website. You have a map, and people hide little stuff via GPS. They only give you the GPS data. You have to go to those places and find those things. And sometimes you can trade little gadgets, Like you take something out, it's a bigger box, you take something out, put something else in, or you just sign it and you can say, I found it, I've been here, and it adds to your score. It's been very fun while I was there, but I spent entire nights, and sometimes it took me into the weirdest regions. And this one time, it actually took me past a big biker gang at their shop. It
Wow.
was probably around 4 a.m. and
Mm.
I was the only foreigner, and they were quite big Japanese people.
Mm-hmm.
And finding big Japanese people is not always easy, but I was a little bit intimidated. But I knew big, slow movements, look a little bit annoyed, don't look intimidated, look intimidating.
Mm.
And I got out with them even saying a thing. So no stupid comments,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. I just walked past them. It was fine. So there's no guarantee that everything will work out like that, but it's definitely the posture will show a lot, um, define or decide a lot about whether or not you get yourself in trouble. Um, Two more smaller things, maybe three.
Mm.
Keep copies of important documents, both on your phone or printed out somewhere else. So should someone steal your passport, you at least have a copy and people can identify people can identify you.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you lose it, you can go to the embassy and show it that you have it, show a copy. That will definitely speed up the process. Avoid the most helpful people, the most helpful local people, or
Oh, wow.
like taxi drivers will be people that um, want to guide you, will be people who want to um, help carry your things. Avoid those. Usually comes with a big price tag or with the loss of your belongings.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful. And then the last thing, check ATMs for fake scanners. On YouTube, you will find a lot of videos where people show what are the most used scam ways, how people scam you, how they read your card data as you put it into the ATM slot. Sometimes just stuff that they put onto the the real card slot.
Yeah.
Make sure, give it a tug, look whether it looks fake or secondhand or something like that. And it's very common nowadays, even in the biggest cities, even close to town centers. Like you cannot be safe enough. Check your ATMs that you use. And yeah, that's basically it in terms of tips that I have for safety while traveling as a single person.
Yeah, yeah, so good. Yeah, those are so important. And I would also add that if you feel uncomfortable, yeah, get yourself out of there. Try your best to get the heck out. Because, yeah, even as a woman, there are people that will just find, especially if you look like you're a foreigner, they'll try to make, I don't know, like, I don't know. I've had instances where boys at a public swimming pool tried to, like, make jokes like sexually to me, and they knew I didn't understand the language, so they took the advantage of that. That was very
Mm.
annoying. But
Yeah,
yeah, if you're uncomfortable, just if you feel, even if you're not sure what's going on, if you feel uncomfortable, just get the heck out and don't try to explain until maybe after if you have the chance, but not within the situation.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So how is it different now that you are traveling with your wife?
Just a little bit different. So for now, I would say I focus on the recreational aspects and the relational aspects of doing it together and enjoying each other and enjoying the experience together.
Yeah.
I would say that's how I make the most now. It's a little bit of a different focus than as a single person,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, it's just what it is. I would say um, looks a bit different because you're not as flexible and you cannot just say, okay, I eat whenever, I eat wherever,
Mm-hmm.
um, and spend your day however you want, because now it takes a little bit of planning. You have another person, they need to eat, they cannot just go with your own personal clock and something like that. So I would say it looks a little bit different. We probably travel a little bit less. Reason being, it just costs much
Okay.
more now. Um, and then the pandemic, of course. So we plan on traveling more, but at the moment it's just not that easy. And of course, it also takes a little bit more preparation now than when I was single. I could just
Mhm.
basically hop on the next airplane somewhere else and then figure everything out on the fly. But not everyone has the same level of being okay with just going with the flow and then maybe ending up in a very uncomfortable position. For me, that wouldn't be an issue. Um, Having to stay at a less than optimal hostel for a night or something like that. For me, that's okay. But with a wife, you don't necessarily want to do that. So it just takes a little bit more preparation. It's a little bit more expensive. And that's why it's probably will probably go down a little bit in the frequency and the duration of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it also, as I said, the focus is different because you do it more for recreational purposes.
Mhm.
Because apart from that, you don't really have that much time.
You'll have more time to prepare, or no, I should say you have to take more time to prepare for the travels. You can't be as impulsive as before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I don't really like to be impulsive either with travels. Like I need to know exactly where I'm going and if it's going to be okay. But I know some people are okay with that. But no, with your wife, you have to think about her and where you will stay and the different arrangements so that she is comfortable as well. So, yeah, I can see those things being different. And which Caribbean islands were you going to go to?
We wanted to go to Grenada. Actually, it's a very small island state,
Yeah.
pretty unknown, and so that's why we picked it. Had everything booked,
Yeah.
and then roughly a month before we were going there, so I had to cancel everything. Had a
Yeah.
nice Airbnb villa over there. It was just with beach view, and would have been
Oh,
amazing. But we ended up going to North Carolina instead,
okay.
in the Appalachian Mountains, and it was beautiful in a different way, but also very nice.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll get to go again. What book would you recommend that you think everyone should read?
I do have a few books actually. I'm an avid reader. I love reading, and so there have been a few books that I really love, especially when it comes to relationships, but also to traveling. Let's say the first book, I will probably butcher his name, but Coelho, The Alchemist. It's been quite a book for me. It talks about this guy who actually leaves behind everything in search for a treasure, who leaves his home, his own little shepherding job and stuff like that, leave everything behind to go to embark on an adventure where he doesn't really know where to go, what to find, how to find it, and stuff like that. Many travelers will relate to that because this fiction narrative is actually to some degree what many of us feel on the inside. We don't just travel for the travel in and of itself, but many of us we're seeking for something. It can be an escape from the mundane. It can be that we're in search for a a truer home or something like that. To find a place to where we can actually, in the end, settle down,
Mhm.
or to find ourselves. So we can relate to this aspect of being on a journey, having to leave behind things that are very precious to us, but things that ultimately don't seem to fully fulfill this deeper need and this deeper yearning for for something significant, for something bigger. I really love it. It's been helping me a lot,
Mhm.
and it's filled with wisdom. So that's great. When it comes to the more relational aspect, I would say generally the books from Brené Brown. She's a very well known um, psychologist, very well known due to her TED talk on the what was it the gifts of imperfection. A lot of people have seen that, and it's just very helpful. I would recommend the books The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, and Rising Strong. And she's talking about shame. She's talking about how to get back up when you mess up, how to be a courageous person, and how to be imperfect, to enjoy it, to be okay with it,
Yeah.
and to make mistakes. And
Mhm.
I love that because in relationships in general, but also during traveling, there's just something that we experience on a daily basis. It is We are in an unfamiliar culture. Usually, if we travel abroad, we don't know the customs really. We will mess up. We will make some very uncomfortable decisions sometimes, say something that is just not appropriate.
Uh-huh.
And so how do you get over it? You can
Yeah.
blame yourself for the taxi drive that you accepted and were ripped off by. You can blame yourself for the next couple of days, but you can also accept that you're a human being that makes mistakes. You can reach out to other people. You can be vulnerable about your issues with other people, and thereby create conversation, create deeper friendships, deeper relationships. And so I found this tremendously helpful, because relating to people and relating to yourself and to your own messes is something you discover in general, wherever, but also specifically while traveling, just because I would say counter or cross-cultural mistakes, sometimes they just hit really deep,
Yeah.
and they can make you feel quite self-conscious and ashamed
Mm-hmm.
at times.
Yeah.
So, and living abroad is scary. And
Mm-hmm.
so learning to deal with it is something that those books by Brené Brown could definitely help help with. And then another book would
Mm-hmm.
be Attached: The New Signs of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love. It's actually quite interesting why I would pick that. And I would say the reason I picked that is it talks about attachment, the way that we attach ourselves to people specifically, but also to things. And there's a certain danger, and we all have to always keep an eye on our heart and on our personality. What is the reason why I'm traveling? Why can I not settle down? Why do I get restless at times when it comes down to actually committing to something? And there can be an actual fear of commitment that drives my need for novelty, that drives my need um, for traveling. And
Wow.
the issue with that is, if I don't realize that and if I don't tackle it, then it will keep me active. It will keep me going even beyond what I actually want. I
Mm-hmm.
believe every one of us wants to find a person to relate to eventually, wants to find a place that we can call home.
Mm-hmm.
But for people with, due to their past or whatnot, have who developed certain commitment phobia, um, that's very difficult to commit to something. And I would say this book in general, whether you struggle with it or not, is great if you want to build and understand your way of connecting to people, for all kind of types. It doesn't have to be commitment phobia people or something like that. It helps you understand, because it talks about person different attachment styles. But
Yeah.
in general, especially in the traveling community, I would say, um, be sure that it's not a fear of commitment that drives your need to travel.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is, then sooner or later, you will actually be the biggest hindrance, the biggest obstacle to you finding what you're actually seeking with all your travels. It is people you can, like, I would say, firm relationships and a place you can call home.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm really just silent right now because I'm just soaking in so much. Yeah, if you are interested, we'll link the books below so you can go and check them out. And I think I'll be checking some of them out myself. It's so good. Thank you so much for, sharing these gems. And what advice would you give to any person who is single and traveling for any reason?
Yeah, I would say in general, for people who are just traveling in general without the relationship aspect being a focus now, I would say make use of the flexibility that you have, and keep a positive posture.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping a positive posture when you encounter new things, different ways of doing stuff. One of the one of the best things when you travel is to see new places, but more than that is to discover different approaches to life and different ways of thinking, different understandings of reality, and you can integrate them. And I would definitely say go for the integration part. You can be judgmental, you can just block in general, or you can integrate it. And I believe integration is always the best way to go about, because those people, they live a certain way, they do things different, and we don't have to decide whether it's better or worse. You can decide for yourself which way you want to go, but don't go into this judgmental mode where you judge other people or even yourself. Another way, of course, we can fall on the other side of the horse is to say, oh, they do it right, and we as Americans or as Germans, we do it completely wrong. And then you come back to Germany and you judge everyone in Germany or something like that.
Yeah.
No, keep an open posture, enjoy the flexibility, enjoy different approaches, and don't decide whether it's better or whether it's worse. It is what it is, and you can integrate whatever you find helpful into your own life and into your own future. And I believe this positive attitude towards what you see, whatever you see, is the best way to not get into culture shock, to not get into culture stress, because culture stress always develops at first as a condescending attitude towards things that you see or you experience. And as soon as I see something like that in my heart developing in my mind, where I'm like, oh, that's really frustrating how they do it here or something like that, I stop and I say, it is what it is. It's their way of doing things. I've learned something else, but maybe they have their reasons. Maybe it actually is better in a different way. And even if it's not, I don't want to be condescending, because then I make my time here, wherever I am at that moment, really difficult. So this positive attitude is probably the best tip that I can give to people traveling in general. Don't judge, accept it, and integrate whatever is helpful. And then in terms of relationships, if you're a single person, whether or not you actually want to be single, be intentional about it. One thing I already said earlier, if you don't want to change your relationship status, then be intentional about it. Don't date anyone. Don't lead anyone on. Don't get into situations where you might fall for someone. And even if you do, you don't have to act on it. So, but if you actually do want to get to know someone, if you actually do want to find someone, even abroad, if you actually do want to stop being single, then be intentional about that too. Reach out to people, go to places where the type of person you're looking for would actually be. And then don't play games, be very outspoken, be intentional in the sense that you look, would this work out? Is there a possibility? Is there an option for this relationship actually to work out? And for me, we said it earlier a little bit, I met my wife abroad here in Turkey, actually. And I was living here at that time, had a 2-year visa. After that, I went back to Germany, but had a 2-year visa, and I ran into her. And I saw her, and I was... without words, let's put it that way. I knew I wanted her.
Yeah.
And so, but I know just feeling that in the moment doesn't help. It's not enough to initiate a relationship. So I actually started really getting to know her intentionally very quickly, and to figure out, does she match the person that I have in mind when it comes to spending the rest of my life with that person. And so I was very intentional in getting to know her and trying to ask those questions without her noticing what I was getting at, that I needed to be answered. And then actually, she was just here for 2.5 months, was just a normal 90-day tourist visa. And so I knew I didn't have a lot of time. If this was going to work out, if this should actually be a relationship, I knew I would not have a lot of time. So I was intentional in getting to know her very quickly, answering the questions very quickly. But then also I looked at what it would look like, her being American, me being German, me living in Turkey at the time. What does that look like? Yeah. And so I sat down and painted it out, various scenarios that were likely to happen should we actually get into a relationship. And it meant long distance. It meant me relocating either permanently or temporarily. It meant for her to probably move internationally a couple more times, and possibly even to every now and then live in a different nation like Germany that she's not familiar with. And so actually, and I don't say that you have to be that crazy and that intentional, but for me, on our first date, I, at the end of the date, gave her about 3-year outline with various scenarios of what this would look like if we actually got into a relationship. So I didn't just want to date to not be single. I wanted to date to marry this person, marry this woman. But at the same time, I was very clear in looking, is it possible? What would it look like? Those different possible scenarios, would I be okay with it? If the answer to those things is no, if you're not okay with it, if it doesn't have a future, or there's no scenario that can be found that this could actually work out, then don't date. So be very intentional. It's the best way, especially while traveling, and especially while meeting your spouse while traveling, or being already in a relationship and then traveling. You have to be intentional. Implement your relationship in your plans. See whether it works, see whether it fits, and see whether you really want it. Because the biggest problem when you're not intentional is with the number to your bucket list of places that you've been to, you add a broken heart to each of those places. That makes those places less interesting to you in the future, because you don't want to relive certain experiences by going to the same places down the road. And at the same time, you don't want to get your heart broken in all those places while traveling. So be intentional. Of course, there's never a guarantee that it's actually going to work out, a relationship is actually going to work out, but you do want to be intentional as much as possible. You do want to look, does that have a future? Is it possible? Does that make sense? Would it be to some degree logical to get into a relationship with that person? What would it look like? What would our future look like? And is that something I can find my yes to?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so good. So be intentional. Yeah, it's so much value. So for you, even when you got to know the person who is now your wife, you thought about the different scenarios, and you presented it to her. And yeah, I guess to others it may seem a bit too intentional, but it worked for you, you know,
Yes.
and it can work for others as well. And I liked what you said about knowing your personality, and I think it relates to getting to know people as well. So if you're getting to know a potential person, your personality and their personality will, be involved in the relating as well.
Definitely. Actually, one of the books that, not one of the books, but one of the topics I would recommend people to research is personality types.
Yeah.
Understanding yourself and allowing yourself to be yourself, and understanding other people and allowing them to be however they are, also then relates to me letting other cultures be the way they are. So understanding yourself, understanding other people helps in general when living in different cultures. Because it means you accept yourself, you accept the other person, you accept your culture, you accept the other culture.
Yeah. Oh wow, yeah, that's so true. I would say I need to review personality types myself. It's been a while. So here we go. We're going to land the plane on this interview. So if you could describe travel in one word, what would it be?
Novelty. New places, new people, new experiences, new perspectives, new ways of thinking, new aspects of life. Novelty.